The moment Luca de Lorenzo put a gun on the table between us, I knew my father had sold me. 3 days ago, I was planning my graduate school applications. Tonight, I'm signing a contract that trades 2 years of my life for my family's survival. They call him the most dangerous man in the city, a crime lord who built an empire on fear and blood. And now, he's going to be my husband. This is the story of how I became the wife of a monster and discovered I had claws of my own. If you want to see how far darkness can push someone before they push back, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The apartment door was unlocked. That was the first wrong thing Alyssa Carter noticed when she climbed the narrow stairwell to the third-floor walk-up she shared with her father. Her keys dangled uselessly from her finger as she stared at the gap between door and frame, just wide enough to let a sliver of lamplight escape into the hallway. Her chest tightened. Dad never left the door unlocked. Not in this neighborhood. Not after what happened to Mrs. Chen downstairs last month. Alyssa pushed the door open slowly, every muscle in her body coiled tight. The hinges creaked, a familiar sound that had never felt ominous until this exact moment. Dad? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The living room looked wrong. The furniture was the same, the sagging brown couch, the coffee table with the water ring she'd made when she was 12, the TV that only worked if you hit it on the left side. But the air itself felt different, heavier, like the room was holding its breath. Then she saw him. A man sat in her father's recliner, the one with the duct tape holding the armrest together. He wore a suit that probably cost more than 6 months of her rent, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that caught the light. His hands rested on the chair's arms with the casual confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, dark hair styled with precision, sharp jawline, and eyes the color of steel in winter. Handsome in the way a blade was handsome, all clean lines and lethal edges. Alyssa Carter. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, like he was greeting a friend. Right on time. She didn't move from the doorway. Who the hell are you? Where's my father? Your father is fine. For now. The man gestured to the couch with one hand, the movement elegant and economical. Please, sit. I'm not sitting anywhere until you tell me. I'm Luca de Lorenzo. He said it simply, like the name should mean something. It did. Every cell in Alyssa's body went cold. Everyone in the city knew that name. You heard it in whispers in the wrong parts of town. Saw it in newspaper articles that used words like alleged and suspected. Luca de Lorenzo owned half the construction companies, a third of the shipping operations, and, if the rumors were true, every dirty cop and crooked politician worth buying. He was a ghost, a legend, a monster that lived in the shadows of the city's underbelly, and he was sitting in her father's chair. Where is he? Alyssa's voice shook despite her best efforts. What did you do to him? I haven't done anything. Yet. Luca's eyes tracked her with unsettling focus. But I will need to, unless you and I come to an agreement. So please, again that graceful gesture. Sit down. Alyssa's mind raced. She could run. The door was right behind her. She could scream, call the police, do something other than walk deeper into whatever nightmare this was. But her father. If this man had her father. She sat. The couch cushions sank beneath her weight, springs protesting. Up close, she could see more details. The small scar on Luca's left eyebrow. The expensive watch on his wrist. Simple, elegant, probably worth more than her car. The absolute stillness with which he held himself, like a predator conserving energy. Smart girl. Luca leaned back slightly. Your father told me you were intelligent. Engineering major at State, graduating summa cum laude next spring. Already accepted into 3 graduate programs. Ice crawled down Alyssa's spine. How do you... I make it my business to know things, Miss Carter. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a manila folder, bent slightly at the corners. He set it on the coffee table between them, his movements deliberate. Your father has been borrowing money from me for the past 18 months. Small amounts at first. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. He told me it was for your education, your future. Alyssa's stomach dropped. No. That's not... He wouldn't... He would. He did. Luca opened the folder. Inside were papers, receipts, signatures she recognized as her father's shaky handwriting. The total, with interest, now stands at $473,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. Nearly $500,000. That's insane, Alyssa whispered. We don't have that kind of money. We've never had that kind of money. There's no way he... The initial loans were reasonable, but your father made a mistake 6 months ago. Luca's tone remained conversational, almost friendly. It made everything worse. He tried to pay me back using money he'd stolen from someone else, someone who worked for me. When that person came looking for their money, your father panicked. He borrowed more. Then he tried to run. The room spun. Alyssa remembered 6 months ago. Her father had been strange, jumpy, paranoid. He'd asked her weird questions about how quickly she could pack, whether she'd ever thought about moving to another state. She'd assumed it was anxiety about her graduating, about being alone once she left for grad school. Where is he? She asked again, firmer this time. Somewhere safe. As I said, I haven't hurt him. Luca closed the folder. I don't particularly enjoy hurting people, Miss Carter. It's inefficient, messy. But I'm a businessman, and I cannot allow debts to go unpaid. It sets a bad precedent. We'll pay you back. I'll get a job, we'll set up a payment plan at your projected starting salary, paying 10% of your income toward this debt. It would take you approximately 68 years to repay me, assuming no additional interest. Luca's eyes never left hers. I'm a patient man, Miss Carter, but not that patient. Alyssa's hands clenched into fists on her lap. Then what do you want? I want to make you an offer. He stood then, and Alyssa's breath caught. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that seemed to fill the entire room. He moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the street below. I need a wife, he said simply. Alyssa blinked. Excuse me? Not a real marriage, not in any meaningful sense. He turned back to face her. I need someone who can play the role, attend events, be seen at my side, help maintain certain appearances. The criminal underworld respects power, Miss Carter, but the legitimate business world respects respectability. I've been building an empire that bridges both. For that, I need the trappings of a normal life. You're insane. I'm practical. Luca moved back toward the chair but didn't sit. Here's what I'm proposing. You marry me. You live in my home, attend functions as my wife, and maintain the appearance of a genuine relationship. In exchange, your father's debt is erased completely. After 2 years, we divorce quietly. You'll receive a settlement of $1 million and be free to resume your life. Your father remains unharmed. Everyone wins. Alyssa stood up so fast the room tilted. You can't be serious. You can't buy a person. I'm not buying you. I'm offering you a contract. His voice remained maddeningly calm. A job, if you prefer to think of it that way. You provide a service, you receive compensation. It's quite straightforward. It's slavery. It's survival. For the first time, something sharp entered Luca's tone. Make no mistake about what's at stake here, Miss Carter. If you refuse, I will collect what I'm owed. Your father will disappear. His body will never be found. And because he used your name as a co-signer on several of these loans, yes, he forged your signature. It's all documented. You will inherit his debt. I will take your apartment, your car, your bank accounts. I will ensure that every graduate program rescinds their acceptance. I will make certain that you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll come to collect the rest. The words landed like blows, each one more devastating than the last. You're a monster, Alyssa breathed. Yes. Luca said it without hesitation, without shame. I am, but I'm a monster offering you a way out. 2 years of your life in exchange for your father's survival and your own future. It's more mercy than most people in my position would show. Alyssa's mind screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything but stand here and consider this insanity. But her father, weak, foolish, desperate father, who'd apparently sold his soul and nearly sold hers too, was out there somewhere, in danger, because of choices she hadn't made, debts she hadn't incurred. How do I know you'll keep your word? The question came out hoarse. You don't. Luca's honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. But consider this. I have nothing to gain by harming you or your father once you've agreed. You're worth more to me as a cooperative wife than as a corpse. And unlike your father, I keep my promises. He pulled something else from his jacket, a pen, sleek and silver. The contract is in the folder. Read it if you like. You'll find it's quite generous, all things considered. Sign it, and your father will be returned to this apartment within the hour, unharmed and debt-free. Refuse, and I walk out that door. You'll never see either of us again. Alyssa stared at the folder on the coffee table like it was a coiled snake. How long do I have to decide? Luca checked his watch, the gesture so casual it made her want to scream. 3 minutes. That's not enough time to... It's more than enough time to answer the only question that matters. Do you love your father enough to save him? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Did she love him? The man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd worked double shifts to keep food on the table, who'd never missed a parent-teacher conference or a birthday. Yes, of course she did. Did she love him enough to chain herself to a monster for 2 years? Alyssa looked at Luca de Lorenzo, really looked at him, tried to see past the expensive suit and the cold eyes to whatever human being might exist underneath. She found nothing, just calculation, just power. If I sign this, she said slowly, I want to see him first. I want to know he's alive. You'll see him after. You have my word. Your word means nothing to me. Something flickered across Luca's face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. Fair enough, but it's all you're going to get. 2 minutes, Miss Carter. Alyssa's hands trembled as she reached for the folder. The contract was dense, full of legal language that would take hours to parse properly. But certain phrases jumped out at her. Duration of 24 months. Public appearances as required. Separate bedrooms to be maintained. No romantic or sexual obligations. Full settlement of debts incurred by Thomas Carter. Final payment of $1 million upon successful completion. Her father's name. There, in black and white, proof that this nightmare was real. 1 minute. I need more time. No, you don't. You need to decide if you're brave enough to do what's necessary. Luca's voice cut through her panic like a knife. I've done my research, Miss Carter. You're a survivor. You lost your mother when you were 8 and helped raise yourself while your father worked himself half to death. You put yourself through college on scholarships and night jobs. You don't give up when things get hard. So don't start now. Alyssa's vision blurred. Tears? Rage? She couldn't tell anymore. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 30 seconds. She thought about grad school, about the research position she'd been offered at MIT studying renewable energy systems, about the life she'd planned, the future she'd built brick by careful brick. She thought about her father, wherever he was, scared, alone, waiting for a daughter who might not be brave enough to save him. 10 seconds, Alyssa picked up the pen. I have conditions, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Luca raised an eyebrow. You're not in a position to, I sign this, I own my education. You don't interfere with my studies. I finish my degree. A pause. Then, acceptable. And my father never knows the real terms of this agreement. He thinks I'm marrying you because I want to. Why? Because he'll blame himself. Because I don't want him spending the rest of his life knowing I did this for him. Her throat tightened. Let him think I fell for some rich guy. Let him believe I'm happy. Luca studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Agreed. And if you lay a hand on me, if you even think about... I'm not interested in coercion, Miss Carter. As I said, no romantic or sexual obligations. You have my word on that as well. His word. That meaningless thing she was apparently betting her life on. Alyssa put pen to paper. Her signature looked strange, foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Someone braver or more foolish or maybe just more desperate than the girl she'd been when she'd walked through that door 15 minutes ago. The moment she finished the last letter of her name, Luca took the contract. He produced a phone from his pocket and made a call. Release him, he said simply, then hung up. That's it? Alyssa's voice cracked. That's all? That's all. Luca folded the contract and returned it to his jacket. Your father will be home within the hour. I suggest you use that time to compose yourself. He can't see you like this. When she had to stop, swallow, start again. When do I have to? I'll send a car for you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Bring whatever belongings you need. Everything else will be provided. Tomorrow? I need more time to. You'll have the rest of your life when this is over, Miss Carter. For now, you have until tomorrow evening. He moved toward the door with that same predatory grace. Oh, and one more thing. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. Welcome to the family. Then he was gone. Alyssa stood alone in the apartment, her apartment, though it wouldn't be for much longer, and felt the full weight of what she'd done crash over her. She'd sold herself. For 2 years of her life, she would belong to a man who viewed people as assets, who spoke about violence the way normal people talked about the weather, who had just bought her like she was a piece of furniture. She sank back onto the couch, the contract's echo burning in her mind. Mrs. Alyssa De Lorenzo. The name tasted like ash. 47 minutes later, her father burst through the door. Alyssa, sweetheart, are you? He stopped short when he saw her sitting there, perfectly still on the couch. What happened? Did they hurt you? Did anyone? I'm fine, Dad. The lie came easier than she expected. Are you okay? Thomas Carter looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his face pale and drawn. But he was alive, whole. That was what mattered. I'm so sorry. He collapsed onto the couch beside her, and she caught the smell of stale sweat and fear. I screwed up so bad. I thought I could fix it. I thought, it's okay. It's not okay. Alyssa, that man is dangerous. I know who he is. Her father went very still. What did you do? This was it, the first of what would surely be 1,000 lies. I made a deal with him. No, Alyssa, you can't. It's done, Dad. She turned to face him, and she must have done a good job with her expression because he actually flinched. He offered to forgive your debt if I agreed to marry him. The color drained from her father's face. You didn't. I did. You can't marry him. He's a criminal. He's also the only reason you're sitting here instead of at the bottom of the river. The harshness in her voice surprised her. You put us in this position. You made choices that left me with exactly one way out. So I took it. I'll fix this. I'll find the money somehow. There is no fixing this. Alyssa stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. The deal is made. I signed a contract. Tomorrow I move into his house, and in 6 weeks we get married. 6 weeks! Her father's voice rose to a shout. Alyssa, you can't just... You're throwing your life away for me. I'm saving both our lives. She met his eyes, willing him to see the conviction she didn't quite feel. And maybe I'm okay with it. Maybe I'm tired of scraping by. Maybe I want the kind of life he can give me. The lie felt like poison on her tongue. Her father stared at her like she was a stranger. You don't mean that. Don't tell me what I mean. She moved toward her bedroom, needing space, needing air, needing anything but this conversation. I need to pack. You should get some rest. Alyssa. She closed the bedroom door before he could finish. Alone in the small room she'd lived in since childhood, surrounded by textbooks and engineering models and posters from a life that was already slipping away, Alyssa finally let herself break. The sobs came hard and silent, her body shaking with the force of holding them quiet. She pressed her face into her pillow and screamed, the sound muffled to nothing. Tomorrow, a car would come. Tomorrow, she would step into a world she didn't understand, bound to a man she didn't know, playing a role she'd never auditioned for. Tomorrow, Alyssa Carter would begin to disappear. And someone else, someone harder, someone colder, someone who could survive 2 years in hell, would have to take her place. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she started packing. The next evening arrived too quickly and too slowly all at once. Alyssa spent the day in a haze, moving through the motions of normalcy while her mind spun in circles. She called her best friend Emma and lied about meeting someone. She emailed her academic advisor about taking a leave of absence, citing personal circumstances. She packed a suitcase with clothes that suddenly seemed shabby and inadequate. Her father didn't speak to her. He moved around the apartment like a ghost. his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Several times she caught him watching her with an expression that might have been grief or might have been shame. At 5:30, she showered and changed into the nicest outfit she owned, a simple black dress she'd bought for interviews. It felt like funeral clothes. At exactly 6 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Not Luca himself. A driver, middle-aged, professional, with the kind of face that revealed nothing. He wore a dark suit and held himself with military precision. "Miss Carter, I'm here to collect you." Collect, like she was a package. "Just a minute." She turned back to her father, who'd stood up from the couch. "Dad?" He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry." "I know." She hugged him back just as hard. "I love you." "If he hurts you, he won't." Another lie. She was getting good at those. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" He pulled back, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to do this." "Yeah," she said softly. "I do." The driver took her suitcase. She followed him down the stairs, each step feeling like a mile. At the bottom, a sleek black car waited at the curb, something German and expensive, so out of place on this street, it might as well have been a spaceship. The driver opened the back door. Alyssa looked up at the 3rd-floor window one last time. Her father stood there, a silhouette against the lamplight, watching her leave. She got in the car. The door closed with a solid, final thunk. The interior smelled like leather and something else, cologne maybe, or just money. The seats were butter soft. Everything was spotless, controlled, expensive. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Alyssa watched her building shrink in the rear window until it disappeared around a corner. "How long is the drive?" she asked. "Approximately 40 minutes, miss." The driver's eyes found hers in the rearview mirror. "Mr. De Lorenzo's estate is outside the city proper." Estate. Of course it was. They drove in silence through the city streets, leaving behind the cramped neighborhoods and aging buildings, passing through the downtown corridor with its office towers and construction cranes. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Eventually, the buildings gave way to trees. The road became smoother, wider. Gates started appearing, long driveways leading to houses set back from the road, hidden behind perfect hedges and iron fences. Old money. Real money. The kind of wealth Alyssa had only ever seen in movies. The driver turned onto a private road marked only by a number on a small bronze plaque. They followed it for nearly a mile before the gates appeared. Tall. Black iron with subtle scrollwork. A security camera tracked their approach. The gates swung open silently. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, ancient trees, careful landscaping, everything precise and deliberate. Then the house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion. 3 stories of stone and glass, with wings extending in both directions from a central facade. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows. A fountain burbled in the circular drive. Everything about it screamed power and permanence. This was going to be her prison. The car stopped at the main entrance. The driver came around and opened her door. "This way, miss." The front door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, late 50s, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress and sensible shoes. Her face was kind but professional. "Miss Carter, welcome. I'm Mrs. Chen, the head of household staff. Please, come in." Not the same Mrs. Chen from her building. Different woman entirely. Alyssa's exhausted brain struggled to catch up. The entry hall was vast. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, artwork that was probably worth more than her education. Everything gleamed. "Mr. De Lorenzo is in his study," Mrs. Chen said. "He asked that I show you to your room first. You'll want to freshen up, I'm sure. Dinner is at 8. "Okay." Alyssa's voice sounded small in the cavernous space. She followed Mrs. Chen up the staircase, down a hallway lined with more art, past closed doors that hinted at rooms she'd eventually have to learn. The house was beautiful and cold, like a museum. "Here we are." Mrs. Chen opened a door near the end of the hall. "Your bedroom. The bathroom is through there. Your closet has been stocked with essentials, but Mr. De Lorenzo said you should make a list of anything additional you need." The room was bigger than her entire apartment. A massive bed dominated the space, dressed in cream and gold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds. A sitting area with a sofa and chairs. A desk. A fireplace. It was gorgeous. It was a cage. Mr. De Lorenzo's room is at the other end of the hall, Mrs. Chen continued. You'll have complete privacy. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Just dial 0 for the kitchen or security. Security. Right. Because this was the kind of house that needed security. Thank you, Alyssa managed. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. I know this must be overwhelming, but you'll adjust. We all do. Then she left, closing the door quietly behind her. Alyssa stood alone in her gilded cage and tried to breathe. The closet was indeed stocked. Dresses, casual wear, even pajamas, all in her size. How did he know her size? The thought made her skin crawl. She washed her face in the bathroom. Marble counters, a tub big enough to swim in, towels so soft they felt like clouds, and changed into something that wasn't her interview dress. At 7:50, there was a soft knock. Miss Carter? A young woman's voice. Mr. De Lorenzo is ready for dinner. Here we go. Alyssa followed the staff member, Maria, she introduced herself, back downstairs and through a series of hallways to a formal dining room, a table that could seat 20, but only 2 places were set at one end. Luca stood when she entered. He'd changed out of his suit into something more casual, slacks and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. It made him look younger, more human. Somehow that was worse. Alyssa, I hope your room is satisfactory. She bristled at the casual use of her first name. It's fine. Please, sit. She took the chair across from him. A staff member appeared immediately, pouring wine she didn't want and wouldn't drink. The first course arrived, some kind of soup, probably gourmet, probably expensive. Alyssa's stomach turned. You'll want to eat, Luca said, picking up his spoon. The next few weeks will be demanding. What happens in the next few weeks? Preparation. You'll meet with a stylist, learn the basics of my business operations, at least the legitimate ones, and begin appearing at my side for minor events. We need to establish the relationship publicly before the wedding. The wedding. Right. That thing that was happening in 6 weeks. I need to finish my semester, Alyssa said. Finals are in 3 weeks. You can study here. I'll arrange for you to take your exams remotely if necessary. I can't just disappear from campus. People will ask questions. Tell them you're engaged, that you're busy with wedding planning. Luca took a sip of wine. It's not far from the truth. The truth is that you're forcing me into this. I gave you a choice. That wasn't a choice. The words burst out before she could stop them. You threatened my father. You threatened me. You call that a choice? Luca set down his glass very carefully. I presented you with options and their consequences. You made a decision. That's what adults do. Adults don't buy people. No, they make strategic alliances. They negotiate contracts. They do what's necessary to protect what matters to them. His eyes were steady on hers. You chose to protect your father. I respect that, even if you're currently regretting it. Alyssa wanted to throw her soup at him, wanted to scream, wanted to run. She did none of those things. Instead, she picked up her spoon and took a bite. The soup was perfect, of course, rich and complex and completely wasted on her. They ate in tense silence for several minutes. I have questions, Alyssa said finally. I expected you would. Why me? Why do you need a wife at all? Can't you just hire an escort for events or something? Escorts are temporary, easily dismissed. I need someone with staying power. Someone who appears to be a genuine partner, not a paid companion. Luca leaned back in his chair. My business operations are expanding into more legitimate territories. Real estate development, tech investments, charitable foundations. The people I need to impress care about respectability. A wife provides that. There are probably 1,000 women who'd marry you willingly for your money. Probably. But they'd expect the marriage to be real. They'd want access to my life, my business, my resources beyond what I'm willing to share. You, on the other hand, have clear boundaries. You want your father safe and your freedom restored. Our arrangement is transactional, clean. The word clean made her want to laugh hysterically. What about your people? Alyssa asked. The criminal side of your business. Won't they see a wife as a weakness? Something flickered across Luca's face. Surprise, maybe. That's perceptive. I'm not stupid. No, you're clearly not. He considered her for a moment. Some will see you that way initially, but I'll make certain they understand that anyone who harms you harms me, and harming me is not compatible with a long life. No, the casual way he discussed violence made Alyssa's skin crawl. What about us? She hated how uncertain the question sounded. How is this supposed to work day to day? We maintain separate quarters. You're free to come and go as you please, within reason. I'll need you available for events and public appearances, which I'll schedule with as much advance notice as possible. Beyond that, live your life. Finish your degree. Pursue your interests. Just like a real marriage, Alyssa said bitterly. Better than many real marriages, in my experience. The second course arrived. Fish, vegetables, more food Alyssa couldn't taste. She pushed it around her plate. I want to see my father, she said. You can call him whenever you like. I want to see him, in person. Luca was quiet for a moment. Once a week. Supervised at first, until I'm certain he won't do anything foolish like try to extract you from this situation. He wouldn't. He already made poor decisions that led to this. I won't assume he's suddenly become rational. Luca's tone was firm. 1 visit per week. You can spend as much time with him as you want during those visits, but someone from my security team will be nearby. It was a prison visit, that's what he was describing, but it was better than nothing. Fine. They finished the meal in silence. Alyssa declined dessert. Mrs. Chen will provide you with tomorrow's schedule, Luca said as they stood. The stylist arrives at 10. In the afternoon, you'll meet with my attorney to review the legal aspects of our arrangement. More contracts to sign? Just paperwork. Prenuptial agreement, primarily. He moved toward the door, then paused. Alyssa. She hated that he used her name so easily. This will be easier if you don't fight it every step of the way. I'm not your enemy. You're the man who bought me. What does that make you? Your husband. He said it simply. In 6 weeks, at least. You might as well get used to the idea. He left her standing in the dining room, alone with the remains of a meal she hadn't wanted and a future she couldn't escape. Alyssa made her way back to her room, her beautiful, spacious, suffocating room, and locked the door even though she knew it was pointless. If Luca wanted in, a lock wouldn't stop him. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed and pulled out her phone. Her father had texted 3 times, each message a variation of, "Are you okay?" She typed back, "I'm fine. The house is beautiful. Talk tomorrow." Then she opened her laptop and stared at her thesis research. The words blurred together, meaningless. How was she supposed to care about renewable energy systems when her entire life had just been reduced to a contract? But she forced herself to focus, to work, because her education was the one thing she'd negotiated to keep, and she'd be damned if she let Luca Di Lorenzo take that too. She worked until her eyes burned and her brain refused to process another word. Then she got ready for bed in the palatial bathroom, changed into the pajamas that someone had bought for her without asking, and climbed into sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. The bed was comfortable. The room was quiet. Everything was perfect. Alyssa had never felt more alone in her life. She lay awake for hours, watching shadows play across the ceiling, thinking about the choice she'd made, about her father, safe because she'd sold herself, about the 2 years stretching ahead of her like a prison sentence, about the cold-eyed man at the other end of the hall who now owned her time, her public life, her very name. Somewhere around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally dragged her under. She dreamed of contracts written in blood, of gilded cages, of a man with winter eyes who called her wife and made it sound like a life sentence. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover. Day 1 of her new life had begun, and Alyssa Carter, soon to be Alyssa Di Lorenzo, had no choice but to survive it. The stylist arrived precisely at 10, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying garment bags and equipment cases like they were preparing for a military operation. Her name was Victoria, and she looked like she'd walked off the pages of a fashion magazine. Razor-sharp bob, immaculate makeup, wearing all black with heels that could double as weapons. She circled Alyssa like a predator assessing prey, her expression neutral but calculating. Was all she said for the first 30 seconds. Alyssa stood in the middle of her bedroom, still wearing the jeans and sweater she'd put on after breakfast. A breakfast she'd eaten alone in a dining room meant for 20, served by staff who treated her with polite deference that felt like a wall. What? Alyssa finally asked. Good bone structure. Clear skin. You're not working with nothing. Victoria gestured to one of her assistants. But we have work to do. Strip down to your underwear. Excuse me? I need to see what I'm working with. Body type, proportions, coloring in natural light. Victoria was already pulling measuring tape from a bag. This isn't personal, darling. It's business. Mr. De Lorenzo is paying me quite well to transform you into someone who belongs at his side. Transform. Like she was a project, a fixer-upper. Alyssa's jaw tightened, but she complied, peeling off her clothes with as much dignity as she could muster while three strangers watched. The morning sunlight felt harsh against her skin. Victoria measured everything: shoulders, bust, waist, hips, inseam. Called out numbers to an assistant who scribbled them in a leather notebook. Then came the photographs: front, side, back, clinical. Impersonal. Your hair's decent, but we'll need a proper cut and color. Nothing dramatic, just refinement. You have good natural waves. We'll work with those. Victoria tilted Alyssa's chin up, examining her face. Minimal makeup for day, but you'll need to learn proper evening application. You have hooded eyes, so standard techniques won't work. I'll teach you. I know how to put on makeup. You know how to put on makeup for a college campus. I'm teaching you how to look like you belong in a world where your earrings cost more than a car. Victoria released her chin. Different skill set entirely. One of the assistants brought forward the garment bags. For the next 2 hours, Alyssa was dressed and undressed like a doll. Gowns for formal events, cocktail dresses for semi-formal gatherings, casual wear that was somehow more expensive than the nicest outfit she'd ever owned. Everything was tailored, elegant, and completely foreign. This one, Victoria said, pulling out a midnight blue dress that shimmered when it caught the light. For the charity gala next week. You'll be making your first public appearance as Mr. De Lorenzo's fiancée. Alyssa's stomach dropped. Next week? That's too soon. I'm not ready. You'll never feel ready. That's not the point. Victoria helped her into the dress, zipping it with practiced efficiency. The point is to look ready, to look like you were born for this role. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves without being obscene, the neckline elegant rather than revealing. Alyssa barely recognized herself in the full-length mirror. Better, Victoria pronounced. With the right jewelry and the proper hair, you'll be passable. Passable, Alyssa repeated flatly. Darling, passable is a triumph when you're starting from scratch. Victoria began packing up the rejected dresses. Now, we need to discuss deportment, how you walk, how you stand, how you hold yourself in public. Mr. De Lorenzo's world is full of predators who can smell insecurity from across a room. You need to project confidence even when you're terrified. I'm not terrified. Victoria's smile was knowing. Of course not. That's exactly the attitude you need to maintain. Come, walk for me. The rest of the morning was an education in humiliation. Victoria critiqued everything: her posture, her gait, the way she held her hands, even how she turned her head. Each correction felt like a small erasure of who she'd been. Shoulders back, chin up. You're not apologizing for existing. Smaller steps. You're gliding, not marching. When you sit, ankles together, knees together. Never sprawl. By the time Victoria finally packed up to leave, Alyssa felt like she'd run a marathon. We'll continue this tomorrow, Victoria said at the door. And I'll be back the day before the gala for final preparations. Try not to bite your nails or pick at your cuticles between now and then. You have hands now, darling. People will notice them. She swept out, leaving Alyssa alone with a closet full of clothes that felt like costumes and a growing sense that she was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt into someone else. Mrs. Chen appeared with lunch on a tray. Mr. De Lorenzo thought you might prefer to eat in your room today. The attorney will be here at 2. Thank you. Alyssa took the tray. A sandwich that looked like art, fruit cut into precise pieces, sparkling water and crystal. Mrs. Chen, how long have you worked for him? The older woman paused. 12 years. Is he always like this? Like what, miss? Controlling, calculating, cold. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. Mr. De Lorenzo is a man who values order and efficiency. But he's fair. He pays well, treats his staff with respect, and has never once raised his voice in anger in all the time I've known him. She moved toward the door, then added quietly, "There are worse men to be bound to, Miss Carter. Much worse." She left before Alyssa could ask what she meant. The attorney arrived at 2 sharp. His name was Richard Castellano, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm competence that came from decades of practice. He set up his briefcase at the desk in Alyssa's room and pulled out documents with the precision of a surgeon. "Miss Carter, thank you for meeting with me. I understand this situation is unusual." That's one word for it. Indeed. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes suggested sympathy. "I'm here to ensure you understand the legal framework of your arrangement with Mr. De Lorenzo. Everything we discuss is privileged. You can speak freely." Could she? In a house that probably had cameras and microphones in every corner? But she sat down across from him and listened as he walked through the prenuptial agreement. It was extensive, pages of legal language that basically ensured Luca's assets remained his, that she had no claim to his business operations, and that the marriage could be dissolved cleanly after 2 years with no contest. "You'll receive the promised settlement upon completion of the contractual term," Castellano explained. $1 million, tax-free. Additionally, you'll have access to a monthly allowance during the marriage for personal expenses. How much? $20,000 per month. Alyssa nearly choked. That was more than she'd made in an entire year at her campus job. For what? Clothing, personal care, entertainment, gifts, whatever you wish. Mr. De Lorenzo doesn't want you to feel constrained. Castellano shuffled papers. There are also provisions for your education. All tuition, fees, and related expenses will be covered for the duration of your graduate studies, should you choose to continue after the marriage ends. He's very thorough. Mr. De Lorenzo leaves nothing to chance. Castellano pulled out another document. This is the actual marriage contract, separate from the legal prenup. It outlines expectations, boundaries, and consequences for breach of contract. Alyssa read through it carefully this time, looking for traps. No romantic or sexual obligations. Check. Separate living quarters. Check. Required public appearances, estimated at 2 to 3 per month. That seemed manageable. Prohibition on discussing the true nature of the arrangement with anyone outside the agreement. That made sense, if uncomfortable. Then she reached the consequences section. If I breach the contract, my father's debt is reinstated immediately and my settlement is forfeit, she read aloud. What constitutes a breach? Public scandal that damages Mr. De Lorenzo's reputation. Infidelity, at least the appearance of it. Attempting to leave before the 2-year term expires. Discussing the contractual nature of the marriage with press or outsiders. Castellano met her eyes. Essentially, anything that undermines the illusion of a genuine marriage. And if he breaches it, then you're released from all obligations, your father's debt remains forgiven, and you receive the full settlement plus an additional $500,000 for the inconvenience. What would constitute a breach on his part? Physical harm, forced sexual contact, attempting to extend the contract beyond 2 years without your consent, failure to provide the agreed-upon allowance, or living conditions. Castellano leaned back. Miss Carter, I want to be clear about something. I've known Luca De Lorenzo for 15 years. I've seen him conduct business in ways that would shock you, but I have never known him to break his word once given. If he says you'll be safe, you'll be safe. If he promises 2 years in freedom, that's what you'll get. You're saying I should trust him. I'm saying he honors his contracts. Whether that's the same as trust is for you to decide. Alyssa signed the papers. What choice did she have? The deal was already made. Castellano packed up his briefcase. The wedding is scheduled for 6 weeks from yesterday. Civil ceremony, private, just witnesses. Mr. De Lorenzo felt a large wedding would be inappropriate given the circumstances. How considerate of him. He tries to be. Castellano paused at the door. For what it's worth, Miss Carter, I think you'll surprise yourself. You're stronger than you realize. Everyone keeps telling me that. It doesn't make this easier. No, but it might make it survivable. That evening, Alyssa saw Luca again at dinner. Same formal dining room, same carefully prepared meal, same tension hanging in the air like smoke. "How was your day?" he asked, as if this were a normal marriage and they were a normal couple. "I was measured, photographed, and dressed like a doll. Then I signed away any legal claim to humanity. Fantastic." She stabbed at her salad more aggressively than necessary. "Your attorney seems to think highly of you. Richard is loyal. He also said you honor your contracts." "I do." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Why does a man like you care about keeping his word?" Luca set down his fork, considering her. "Because my word is the only currency that matters in my world. Money can be taken, power can shift. But reputation, the knowledge that when I promise something, it happens, that's permanent. It's the foundation everything else is built on. So it's just strategy, not actual honor. Does it matter?" He picked up his wine glass. "The result is the same. I told you that you'd be safe, that your father would be safe, that you'd receive your settlement after 2 years. Those things will happen because I said they would. My motivation is irrelevant." Alyssa wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the flaw in his logic. A man who kept his promises for strategic reasons was still a man who kept his promises. "I want to visit my father this weekend," she said. "Arrangements are already being made. Saturday afternoon, you'll have 4 hours. Luca paused. "How is your coursework progressing?" The shift in topic threw her. "Fine. I'm staying on top of my thesis research." "Good. I meant what I said about your education. It's yours to complete." "Why do you care?" "Because part of why I chose you was your intelligence. Dulling that by forcing you to abandon your studies would be counterproductive." He took a bite of his meal, then added, "And because I suspect you'll be far more cooperative if you have something of your own to focus on beyond this situation." "You're very calculating." "Yes." No shame, no apology, just simple acknowledgement. They ate in silence for a while. Then Luca said, "The gala next week. Richard told you about it?" "Victoria mentioned it. First public appearance." "Yes. It's a charity event. Children's Hospital fundraiser. Relatively safe environment for an introduction. The press will be there, but it's controlled, civilized. You'll be photographed. People will ask questions. You'll need to be prepared." Alyssa's anxiety spiked. "Prepared how?" "We'll need a story. How we met, how long we've been together, when I proposed. The details need to be consistent." Luca pushed his plate aside. "I'm thinking something close to the truth, actually. We met through your father, began seeing each other quietly. Fell in love despite the difference in our backgrounds. Very Romeo and Juliet, minus the tragedy." "That's grotesque. That's what people want to hear. A fairy tale. The powerful man and the brilliant young woman from humble beginnings. It's romantic." "There's nothing romantic about this." "No," Luca agreed, "but they don't need to know that." He walked her through the story over the next hour. They'd been seeing each other for 4 months. He'd been charmed by her intelligence and independence. She'd seen past his reputation to the man underneath. The proposal had been intimate, private, just the two of them. They were deeply in love. Each detail felt like a lie piled on top of a lie, building a tower of deception that would eventually collapse and bury her. "You'll need to be comfortable with physical contact," Luca said. "Hand-holding, my arm around your waist, perhaps a kiss on the cheek for photographs. Nothing excessive, but enough to sell the relationship." The thought of his hands on her made Alyssa's skin crawl, but she forced herself to nod. "Fine. We should practice." "What?" Luca stood and moved around the table, offering his hand. "If you flinch every time I touch you, people will notice. Better to acclimate now, in private, than fail in public." Alyssa stared at his outstretched hand like it was a snake, but he was right. She couldn't afford to look uncomfortable with him in front of cameras. She took his hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm, but not crushing. He pulled her to her feet gently, maintaining appropriate distance. "Just this," he said quietly. "Nothing threatening, nothing inappropriate. Just two people who are supposedly in love standing close to each other." He placed his other hand lightly on her waist. Alyssa's entire body went rigid. "Breathe," Luca instructed. "Relax your shoulders. Pretend I'm someone you actually chose to be with." "That's asking a lot." "I'm aware." But his tone wasn't mocking. If anything, it was patient. "Try anyway." She forced herself to breathe, to loosen the tension in her muscles. Luca's hand on her waist was barely there, more suggestion than pressure. He wasn't grabbing, wasn't pulling her closer, just holding. Better, he said. Now, if we're being photographed, you might rest your hand on my chest, like this. He guided her free hand to his chest, placing it over his heart. She could feel the steady beat beneath the fabric of his shirt. It was oddly humanizing, this reminder that despite everything, he was just a man, flesh and blood and heartbeat. When you look at me, Luca continued, his voice low and instructional, don't look afraid, don't look angry, look content, like being near me makes you happy. I'm not that good an actress. Then think of something that does make you happy, your research, a favorite memory, anything. Just soften your expression. Alyssa thought about the day she'd been accepted into MIT's graduate program. The moment she'd opened the email and realized all her work had paid off. The pure, uncomplicated joy of achievement. There, Luca said. That's perfect. Hold that thought. They stood like that for a long moment, posed like lovers, both of them acting roles they'd never auditioned for. It should have been ridiculous. Instead, it was just sad. I think that's enough for tonight, Luca said, finally releasing her. We'll practice more before the gala. You're doing better than I expected. What did you expect? More resistance, more panic. He moved back toward his seat. You're adapting quickly. I don't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Alyssa. You're just making the practical ones. He checked his watch. I have calls to make. Feel free to use the rest of the evening however you wish. The library is stocked if you want reading material. The gym is available if you need to burn off stress. Or you can stay in your room. This is your home now. Act like it. He left her standing in the dining room, her hand still tingling where he'd held it, her mind spinning with everything she'd learned about performing love for an audience. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Mornings with Victoria, learning to move and dress and present herself like someone who belonged in Luca's world. Afternoons with her coursework, desperately clinging to the one piece of her old life that remained. Evenings with Luca, either practicing their public personas or discussing the logistics of their arrangement. She learned that he woke at 5 every morning and worked out in the private gym for an hour before breakfast. That he took his coffee black and read 3 newspapers each day. That he ran legitimate businesses alongside his criminal empire, construction, real estate, import-export operations that were probably covers for less legal activities. She learned that the household staff numbered 12, not counting security personnel who rotated in shifts. That Mrs. Chen had worked for Luca since shortly after his father died and the empire passed to him. That loyalty was currency in this house, and everyone from the gardener to the head of security had been vetted, tested, and proven trustworthy. She learned that Luca's world operated on rules she was only beginning to understand. Respect and fear were 2 sides of the same coin. Power wasn't just about violence. It was about information, control, and the appearance of invincibility. And she learned that despite his cold exterior, Luca kept his promises. Her father called Saturday morning, his voice shaky but relieved, confirming he was safe and the debt collectors had stopped calling. The allowance appeared in a bank account opened in her name. Her professors received elegant notes explaining her temporary leave and arranging for remote examination. Everything Luca said would happen, happened. It made him predictable, at least. And in the chaos of her new life, predictability was something to hold on to. Saturday afternoon arrived too slowly and too quickly. A car took her to a coffee shop in a quiet part of the city. Neutral ground, public enough to be safe, but private enough for conversation. 2 of Luca's security personnel waited outside, trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably. Her father was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking smaller and older than he had just a week ago. Dad? Alyssa hugged him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave. Sweetheart, are you okay? Really okay? He pulled back, searching her face for signs of harm. I'm fine, I promise. She sat across from him, ordering coffee she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. How are you? I should be asking you that. You're the one living with... He glanced around, lowered his voice. With him. The house is beautiful. The staff is kind. I'm being treated well. That's not what I asked. Alyssa met her father's eyes, the same hazel as hers, now clouded with guilt and worry. I'm surviving. That's the best I can offer right now. I should never have put you in this position. I should have. There's no point in should-haves, Dad. This is where we are. She reached across the table, taking his weathered hand in hers. I need you to be okay. I need to know that at least one of us gets to have a normal life while this plays out. Nothing about this is normal. No. But we're making it work. She forced brightness into her voice. Tell me about the shop. Are you still doing repairs for Mrs. Martinez? They talked about mundane things. His work at the auto shop, neighbors and their gossip, the stray cat that had adopted his building, normal conversation that felt like a lifeline to a world that was already slipping away from her. 2 hours passed too quickly. When Alyssa's phone buzzed with a reminder that her time was almost up, she wanted to throw it across the room. I have to go soon, she said reluctantly. When can I see you again? Next week, same time, same place. She squeezed his hand. Dad, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't try to fix this. Don't try to confront Luca or find money to buy me out or anything heroic and stupid. Just live your life. Let me handle this. You shouldn't have to handle it alone. I'm not alone. I have... She stopped herself before saying Luca's name. I have resources. Protection. It's not ideal, but it's manageable. Her father looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. Okay, but if anything changes, if he hurts you or threatens you, then I'll tell you, I promise. They hugged goodbye at the coffee shop door. Alyssa watched through the window as her father walked to his old truck, shoulders hunched against a weight that was partially her burden now. In the car ride back to the estate, she let herself cry silently, turning her face toward the window so the security guard in the front seat wouldn't see. The week leading up to the gala was intensive training. Victoria put her through increasingly complex scenarios: how to navigate a receiving line, how to make small talk with strangers, how to deflect invasive questions with grace. Luca drilled her on their cover story until she could recite it in her sleep, adding details and anecdotes that made the lie feel almost real. They practiced touching until her body stopped flinching at his proximity, hand-holding while walking, his arm around her waist while standing, brief kisses on her temple or cheek that were meant to look affectionate rather than contractual. You're getting better at this, Luca observed one evening as they rehearsed in his study, a massive room lined with books that she suspected he'd actually read. At lying? At performing? He released her hand, moving to pour himself a drink from the bar cart. There's an art to it, convincing people to see what you want them to see rather than what's actually there. Is that how you've built your empire? Performance? Luca considered the question, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler. Partially, but the performance only works if there's substance behind it. People need to believe you're capable of the things you threaten. Otherwise, it's just theater. And you're capable of the things you threaten. His eyes met hers over the rim of his glass. Yes. The simple honesty was more chilling than any elaborate threat could have been. Have you... Lissa wasn't sure she wanted to know, but she asked anyway. Have you killed people? Would the answer change anything? You're already bound to me. I'd like to know what kind of monster I'm married to. We're not married yet. Luca took a sip of his drink. But to answer your question, I've ordered deaths. I've authorized violence. I haven't personally pulled a trigger in years, but the blood is still on my hands. Does that satisfy your curiosity? It should have terrified her. Maybe it did. But Alyssa found herself nodding, appreciating the honesty even as it confirmed her worst assumptions. At least you don't pretend to be something you're not. Pretending is exhausting. I save it for people who matter, business partners, politicians, the legitimate world. With you, there's no point. You already know the worst. Do I? Or is there more I haven't discovered yet? Something flickered across Luca's face, not quite a smile, but close. You're perceptive. That's going to be useful. For what? For surviving in my world. The people we'll interact with aren't all criminals, but they're all dangerous in their own ways. Politicians who smile while planning your destruction. Businessmen who'll shake your hand while plotting to steal your assets. Society wives who'll befriend you while cataloging your weaknesses. He moved closer, and Alyssa held her ground. You'll need to be able to read people, to see past performance to intention. I think you can learn that. You're training me. I'm preparing you. There's a difference. The night before the gala, Alyssa couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. What if she forgot their story? What if someone asked a question she couldn't answer? What if she froze or panicked or revealed the truth in some unguarded moment? At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and wandered downstairs. The house was dark and quiet, but soft light spilled from under the door of Luca's study. She knocked softly. "Come in." Luca sat at his desk, still fully dressed despite the hour, working on a laptop. He looked up when she entered, one eyebrow raised. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, all the ways it could go wrong." "It won't. You can't know that. I can know that I've prepared you as thoroughly as possible. I can know that you're intelligent enough to adapt if something unexpected happens. And I can know that I'll be beside you the entire time." Luca closed his laptop. "Is that what you're actually worried about? The event? Or something else?" Alyssa sank into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. "I keep thinking about who I was a week ago, a student worrying about finals and thesis deadlines and which grad program to accept. Now I'm about to walk into a room full of the city's elite and pretend to be in love with a criminal. It's surreal." "You're mourning your old life. Wouldn't you?" "I mourned mine a long time ago." Luca leaned back, studying her. "I was 23 when my father died and left me his empire. I'd been training for it my whole life, but I wasn't ready. Suddenly I had to be someone I'd never wanted to be. Harder, colder, more ruthless. The person I might have been in a different life died that day. I understand the loss." It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with her. Alyssa found herself leaning forward, curious despite herself. "Who did you want to be?" "It doesn't matter. That version of me couldn't have survived what came next." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the dark grounds. "My father had enemies, rivals who saw his death as an opportunity. I had to prove myself quickly, decisively, or everything would have fallen apart. So I became what I needed to be." "Do you regret it?" "Regret implies I had a choice. I didn't. Just like you don't have a choice now." He turned back to face her. "But I'll tell you something, Alyssa. The person you become in the next 2 years doesn't have to destroy who you were. You can adapt without losing yourself completely. It's possible to play a role while maintaining your core." "Is that what you did?" "I tried. Some days I succeeded. Others," he shrugged, "others I became exactly what my enemies believed I was." They stood in silence for a moment, two people trapped in roles neither had chosen, finding unexpected common ground in shared loss. "Get some sleep," Luca said finally. "Tomorrow will be challenging, but you'll survive it. And after, you'll know you can handle whatever comes next." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've watched you this week. You're afraid, but you're not broken. You're angry, but you're not reckless. You have exactly the kind of strength that endures." He moved toward the door, a subtle dismissal. "Go to bed, Alyssa. Tomorrow we introduce the world to Mrs. De Lorenzo. Best to be rested for your debut." She went back upstairs, his words echoing in her mind. The person you become doesn't have to destroy who you were. She wanted to believe that, needed to believe it. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, she wondered if Luca believed it himself, or if it was just another performance. This one for an audience of one, designed to keep her compliant and cooperative. In the morning, the transformation began in earnest. Victoria arrived with her team at noon, turning Alyssa's bedroom into a salon. Hair was washed, cut, and styled into elegant waves that looked effortless, but probably required an engineering degree to recreate. Makeup was applied with artistic precision, subtle but striking, enhancing her features without looking overdone. Then came the dress. The midnight blue gown fit like it had been painted on, the fabric shimmering with every movement. Diamonds were draped around her neck and wrists, borrowed, Victoria explained, from a jeweler who owed Luca a favor. Shoes that cost more than her previous monthly rent. When Alyssa finally looked in the full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was sophisticated, polished, beautiful in a way that felt alien. This wasn't Alyssa Carter, engineering student. This was someone else entirely. "Perfect," Victoria declared. "You look like you were born to this." That was exactly what Alyssa was afraid of. At 7 p.m., Luca knocked on her door. When she opened it, his reaction was subtle but visible. A slight widening of his eyes, a momentary pause. "You look beautiful," he said simply. He wore a tuxedo that made him look even more dangerous than usual, all sharp lines and controlled power. Together, they looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. They looked like a couple. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Alyssa took it, her hand resting in the crook of his elbow. "As I'll ever be." The car ride to the gala was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Luca's security detail followed in a separate vehicle, maintaining professional distance. When they pulled up to the hotel hosting the event, Alyssa's breath caught. Red carpet, actual red carpet, with photographers and reporters lined up behind velvet ropes, camera flashes creating artificial daylight in the evening darkness. "Remember," Luca said quietly as the driver came around to open their door, "we're in love. We're happy. Nothing else exists except us in this moment." Then the door opened and they stepped into the light. The cameras exploded in a frenzy of flashes. Voices called out questions, overlapping into incomprehensible noise. Luca's hand found the small of Alyssa's back steady and grounding. "Mr. De Lorenzo, who's your companion?" "Luca, over here. Give us a smile." "Is this your girlfriend? Are you together?" Luca guided her down the carpet with practiced ease, stopping at the designated photo area. He pulled her close, and Alyssa remembered her training. "Soften your expression. Look content. Pretend this is real." She smiled. The cameras loved it. "Luca, can you tell us who the beautiful lady is?" a reporter called out. Luca's smile was genuine-looking, warm in a way Alyssa had never seen. "This is Alyssa Carter, my fiancée." The word landed like a bomb. The questions intensified, the flashes became blinding. "When did you propose? How long have you been together? Alyssa, how does it feel to be engaged to one of the city's most eligible bachelors?" Luca leaned close, his lips near her ear. To the cameras, it looked intimate. "Just smile and wave. Don't answer. Let them wonder." They moved through the gauntlet of press and into the hotel. The moment they were inside, away from cameras, Alyssa's legs almost gave out. "Breathe," Luca instructed quietly. "The hard part is over. Now we just have to mingle." Just mingle. With hundreds of the city's most powerful people, all of whom would be evaluating her, judging her, wondering what a man like Luca De Lorenzo was doing with a girl like her. This was going to be a very long night. The ballroom was magnificent in a way that felt almost aggressive. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from ornate ceilings, casting prismatic light across marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. Women in gowns that cost more than Alyssa's former annual salary glided past, dripping with jewels. Men in perfect tuxedos clustered in groups, their laughter controlled, and their handshakes calculated. This was power dressed in evening wear, and Alyssa was walking straight into its heart. Luca's hand remained steady at her back, guiding her through the crowd with the confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. People noticed him immediately, heads turning, conversations pausing mid-sentence, eyes tracking his movement with a mixture of respect and wariness. "Luca!" A man in his 50s approached, hand extended, silver hair, expensive watch, smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you, and who's this lovely creature?" "Richard. This is my fiancée, Alyssa Carter." Luca's introduction was smooth, possessive. "Alyssa, Richard Brennan. He owns half the commercial real estate downtown." "3/4 now, actually." Brennan took Alyssa's hand, his grip lingering just long enough to be uncomfortable. "Fiancée? My goodness, Luca, you've been keeping secrets. When did this happen?" "Recently," Alyssa said, finding her voice. She gently extracted her hand. "We've been keeping things private." "Smart. The vultures in this city love to pick apart new relationships." Brennan's eyes raked over her, assessing. "What do you do, Miss Carter?" "I'm finishing my engineering degree, renewable energy systems." "An engineer? How refreshingly practical." The condescension in his tone was barely masked. "And here I thought Luca would end up with some socialite or model. Well done finding someone with a brain." Alyssa felt Luca tense beside her, but his voice remained pleasant. "Alyssa is brilliant. MIT accepted her for graduate studies." "MIT? Impressive." Brennan didn't sound impressed. Though I suppose you won't be needing that now, will you? Mrs. De Lorenzo has other responsibilities to attend to. The assumption made Alyssa's jaw clench, but before she could respond, Luca spoke. Alyssa will be completing her education. I don't believe in wasting potential. His tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. If you'll excuse us, Richard, I see the mayor arriving. They moved away before Brennan could respond. Once they were out of earshot, Luca leaned close. Ignore him. Richard's a dinosaur who thinks women belong in the kitchen. I noticed. Alyssa kept her smile fixed. Is everyone here going to be like that? Some. Others will be worse. A few will be better. Luca snagged 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, handing her one. The key is to remember they're all performing too. Everyone in this room is playing a role. What role are they playing? Success? Power? Importance? Happiness? He took a sip of champagne. Very few people here are actually happy, Alyssa. They're just better at pretending than most. Before she could respond, a woman's voice cut through the ambient noise. Luca De Lorenzo, as I live and breathe. The woman approaching was stunning. Early 40s, sleek black dress, dark hair swept into an elegant updo. But it was her eyes that caught Alyssa's attention. Sharp, calculating, missing nothing. Vivian, Luca's tone was neutral. You look well. Liar, I look tired. Fundraising is exhausting. Vivian's attention shifted to Alyssa. But you must be the mysterious fiancée everyone's whispering about. I'm Vivian Ross. I run the children's hospital this lovely circus is benefiting. Alyssa Carter. She shook Vivian's hand, surprised by the firm, businesslike grip. Engineering student, brilliant mind, MIT bound. Yes, I already heard. Vivian's smile was genuine, amused. Information travels fast in this crowd. So tell me, how did a smart girl like you end up engaged to this particular shark? Vivian, Luca warned. Oh, hush, I'm just curious. Vivian kept her eyes on Alyssa. Well? Alyssa thought of the rehearsed story, the practiced lines. But something about Vivian's directness made her shift slightly. We met through my father. Luca was persistent. I bet he was. Vivian laughed. Well, welcome to the circus, darling. Fair warning, half the women in this room will hate you for landing the most eligible bachelor, and the other half will pity you for not knowing what you've gotten yourself into. Ignore both groups. They're all just jealous. Jealous of what? Of the fact that you clearly haven't been broken by this world yet. You still have that spark in your eyes, that belief that things might actually turn out okay. It's refreshing. Vivian touched Alyssa's arm lightly. Hold on to that as long as you can. She drifted away into the crowd, leaving Alyssa slightly off balance. I like her, Alyssa said. Vivian's one of the few genuine people you'll meet in circles like this. She also happens to be brilliant at squeezing donations out of people who'd rather set their money on fire than give it to charity. Luca guided her toward another cluster of people. Come, time to meet the mayor. The next hour was a blur of introductions. Politicians with practiced smiles and calculating eyes, business leaders who spoke in careful euphemisms, society wives who evaluated Alyssa like she was a painting they were considering purchasing. Through it all, Luca remained at her side, a steady anchor in choppy waters. She watched him work the room with fascination. He was charming when needed, intimidating when required, always reading the person in front of him and adjusting his approach. It was masterful performance art, and she was expected to match him. You're doing well, Luca murmured during a brief lull. Better than well, natural. I feel like I'm drowning. You're floating. That's all that matters. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate. 5 more introductions, then we can breathe. But the universe had different plans. A man appeared in front of them, younger than most in attendance, maybe late 20s, with styled blonde hair and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Something about him made Alyssa's instincts scream danger. Luca. The man's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. Heard you brought a date. Had to see for myself. Luca's entire demeanor shifted. Still controlled, still calm, but something harder crept into his posture. Marco, I didn't realize you were on the guest list. My father donated heavily this year. They couldn't exactly exclude us. Marco's attention fixed on Alyssa like a predator spotting prey. And this must be the famous fiancé. I'm Marco Castellini. The name meant nothing to Alyssa, but Luca's reaction told her everything she needed to know. This was an enemy. Charmed, Alyssa said carefully. Engineering student, right? How quaint. Marco circled them slowly, still smiling. Tell me, Miss Carter, what exactly attracted you to our dear Luca? His winning personality? His legitimate business ventures? Or perhaps the protection that comes with his name? Marco. Luca's voice was quiet, dangerous. Walk away. I'm just making conversation, getting to know the woman brave enough to tie herself to the De Lorenzo empire. Marco stopped directly in front of Alyssa. Do you know what he does, Miss Carter? Really does? Or are you one of those women who prefers willful ignorance? Alyssa felt Luca tense beside her, ready to intervene, but something in her snapped. She'd spent weeks being measured, molded, and managed. She'd played the perfect fiancé, smiled through condescension, and swallowed her anger. This cocky predator with his transparent attempts at intimidation was one thing too many. I know exactly what he does, Alyssa said, her voice steady and clear. I also know what you're trying to do right now, and it's pathetic. Marco's smile faltered. Excuse me? You're trying to rattle me, to see if I'm a weakness you can exploit, to gauge whether I'm an actual partner or just decorative. Alyssa stepped forward, closing the distance between them. But here's what you're missing. I chose this. I chose him. And unlike you, who's clearly operating from a place of insecurity and desperation, I don't need to play games to prove my worth. The nearby conversations had quieted. People were watching now, pretending not to, while absolutely listening to every word. Marco's face flushed red. You have no idea who you're talking to. I know exactly who I'm talking to. You're Marco Castellini. Your family runs operations that compete with Luca's. You see me as a potential vulnerability. But what you don't realize is that by coming at me this directly, this clumsily, you've shown me exactly how threatened you are. Alyssa smiled, sweet and sharp. Thanks for that information. It's valuable. For a long moment, Marco just stared at her. Then he laughed, harsh, brittle. You've got fire, I'll give you that. But fire burns out, Miss Carter, especially when it's in over its head. Then I guess we'll see, won't we? Alyssa held his gaze until he looked away first. Marco nodded once, sharp and angry, then disappeared into the crowd. The moment he was gone, Luca's hand found her elbow, guiding her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. His expression was unreadable. That was incredibly stupid, he said quietly. I know. Marco Castellini is dangerous. His family has been trying to muscle into my territory for years. You just made yourself a target. I was already a target the moment I agreed to this arrangement. Alyssa met his eyes. At least now he knows I'm not going to roll over. Something flickered across Luca's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You weren't supposed to engage. You were supposed to let me handle it. I'm not a decoration, Luca. If I'm going to be your wife, even in pretense, I can't just stand there and let people like him think I'm weak. That makes you look weak. Or it makes you look reckless. Maybe, but it also makes me look real. Like someone you'd actually choose to marry, not just acquire. Alyssa straightened her shoulders. If we're selling a love story, it better be convincing. And love means standing up for each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Luca studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the practiced public smile, but something genuine. You're going to be a problem, he said. Good, you like problems. They keep you sharp. His smile widened fractionally. Come on, let's get some air before anyone else decides to test you. They slipped out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool against Alyssa's heated skin, the sounds of the gala muted by distance and closed doors. City lights spread below them like fallen stars. Alyssa braced her hands on the stone railing, breathing deeply. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I meant what I said in there, Luca said, standing beside her. That was stupid, but it was also impressive. I shouldn't have done it. No, you shouldn't have. But you did, and you held your ground. Marco won't forget that. Luca leaned against the railing, looking out at the city rather than at her. Most people in there are terrified of him. You called him pathetic to his face. It was accurate. Accurate and dangerous aren't mutually exclusive. He paused. Marco's family operates differently than mine. They're messier, more violent, less strategic. If they decide you're a genuine threat, then what, you'll protect me? Isn't that part of our deal? Yes. But protection works better when you're not actively painting targets on yourself. Alyssa turned to face him. You want me to play the role of your wife, but you don't want me to actually act like your wife. That's contradictory. I want you alive and unharmed at the end of 2 years. Everything else is secondary. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why does it matter? You said yourself this is transactional. If something happened to me, you could find another woman to play this role. Why do you actually care? Luca was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. Because I gave you my word that you'd be safe, and because... He stopped, seemed to reconsider. Because you're more valuable intact than damaged. Your intelligence, your fire, those things have utility. I prefer not to waste them. It should have felt cold, calculating, and maybe it was, but there was something else underneath his words, something he wasn't saying. Before Alyssa could press him, the balcony door opened. A security guard stepped out. Sir, we have a situation inside. The Castellinis are making noise about leaving. You should be present. Luca's jaw tightened. Of course they are. Marco ran to Daddy. He looked at Alyssa. Stay here. I'll handle this. No. Alyssa, if I started this, I should be there when you finish it. Running and hiding makes me look weak. Makes us look weak. She moved toward the door. Come on, let's go face the music together. She didn't wait for his response, just walked back into the ballroom with her head high and her heart hammering. The atmosphere inside had shifted. Conversations were hushed, urgent. People clustered in groups, watching the drama unfold like it was theater. At the center of the room stood Marco, with an older man who had to be his father. Same build, same cold eyes, but with silver hair and the weight of years in his bearing. Luca appeared at Alyssa's side, his hand finding hers. Let me do the talking. They approached together. The elder Castellini watched them come, his expression unreadable. Luca, he said, we seem to have a problem. Do we, Vincent? Luca's tone was mild. I wasn't aware of any issues. My son tells me your woman insulted him, publicly. Vincent's eyes flicked to Alyssa, assessing. That's not how we do things, not at events like this. Your son approached my fiancée with clear hostile intent, Luca replied calmly. She defended herself, admirably, I might add. She should have deferred to you. She's not my property, Vincent. She's my partner, and partners stand up for themselves. Luca's grip on Alyssa's hand tightened fractionally. If Marco can't handle being called out when he's behaving badly, perhaps he shouldn't engage in such behavior. Vincent's expression darkened. You're defending her. Over established protocol? I'm stating facts. Marco was out of line. Alyssa responded appropriately. If that offends you, well, Luca's smile was sharp. I'm sure you'll survive the disappointment. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching now, not even pretending otherwise. This was the kind of confrontation that would be discussed for weeks. Vincent stepped closer, lowering his voice to something that carried nonetheless. You're making a mistake, Luca. This girl is making you sloppy, emotional. That's dangerous in our line of work. What's dangerous is underestimating people because they don't fit your narrow definitions of power. Luca didn't back down, didn't flinch. Alyssa is exactly where she belongs, at my side. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Not her. Me. The challenge was clear, unmistakable. Vincent's eyes narrowed. Careful, Luca. You're burning bridges tonight. No. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. Luca's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Your son crossed a line. I'm drawing a new one. Anyone who disrespects my fiancée disrespects me. And you know what happens to people who disrespect me, Vincent. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Vincent stared at Luca for a long moment, then at Alyssa. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away, to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Finally, Vincent nodded once. Noted. Marco, we're leaving. But Dad, now. The Castellinis swept out of the ballroom, their exit marked by whispers that followed like a wake. The moment they were gone, the tension broke. Conversations resumed, louder now, fueled by gossip and speculation. Luca released Alyssa's hand. Well, that could have gone better. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Stop apologizing. He turned to face her fully. You did exactly what I would have done in your position. You stood your ground. The only difference is that you're not supposed to have to fight my battles. It wasn't your battle. It was ours. Alyssa met his eyes. You just made that very clear to everyone in this room. Yes, which means everything just became more complicated. But he didn't sound angry. If anything, he sounded almost amused. Come on, we've given them enough entertainment for one night. Let's make our exit before anyone else decides to test your limits. They made their goodbyes, brief, polite, with Luca deflecting questions about the Castellini confrontation with practiced ease. Vivian caught Alyssa on the way out. Well done, she said quietly. You just became the most talked about woman in the city. Is that good or bad? Depends on your perspective. But for what it's worth, I think you're exactly what Luca needs. Someone who won't let him get away with being a tyrant. Vivian squeezed her hand. Stay sharp, darling. The real predators are just starting to notice you. In the car ride home, Luca was quiet. Alyssa watched the city lights blur past the window, her mind replaying the evening's events, the confrontation with Marco, Luca's defense of her, the way he'd stood beside her against the Castellinis without hesitation. It was starting to feel real, dangerously real. What happens now? She asked finally. Now the Castellinis will be watching you, watching us, looking for weaknesses, opportunities, ways to exploit tonight's drama. Luca didn't look at her, his gaze fixed forward. My security team will increase your detail. You don't go anywhere without protection. I'm already a prisoner. Now I'll just have more guards. You're a target. There's a difference. Is there? Alyssa turned to face him. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels the same. The difference is that prisoners don't get to mouth off to dangerous men and walk away unscathed. You did that tonight. You're not as trapped as you think. I'm trapped in this arrangement with you. Yes, but within that arrangement, you're discovering you have more power than you realized. Luca finally looked at her. Tonight proved that. You weren't supposed to engage Marco. You weren't supposed to defend yourself so effectively. You weren't supposed to force my hand in front of the entire room, but you did all three, and the world didn't end. You defended me. I defended my investment. There's a difference. But Alyssa wasn't sure she believed him. The way he'd stood up to Vincent Castellini, the steel in his voice when he'd drawn that line. That wasn't just about protecting an asset. That was something more personal. She didn't say that, though, just turned back to the window and watched the estate gates open for their arrival. The house was quiet when they entered, most of the staff already retired for the night. Alyssa started toward the stairs, exhausted down to her bones, but Luca's voice stopped her. Alyssa? She turned back. He stood in the entry hall, hands in his pockets, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Tired, maybe, or just honest. You did well tonight, he said. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you hate every minute of this arrangement, but you're handling it with more grace and strength than I had any right to expect. I wanted you to know that. The compliment caught her off guard. I thought I was just your investment. You are. But even investments deserve acknowledgement when they exceed expectations. His expression shifted, something almost like vulnerability crossing his features. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll deal with the fallout, but tonight you earned it. He turned and walked toward his study, leaving Alyssa alone in the grand entryway. She climbed the stairs to her room, her mind spinning. The person she'd been when she walked through these doors 2 weeks ago felt like a stranger now. That girl had been terrified, trapped, drowning in circumstances beyond her control. This version of herself. The one who'd stood up to Marco Castellini, who'd forced Luca to defend her publicly, who was learning to navigate a world of calculated violence and strategic deception, was someone different, someone harder. Was that growth or corruption? Evolution or erosion? Alyssa honestly didn't know. She changed out of the gown, carefully hanging it in the expansive closet alongside clothes that still felt like they belonged to someone else. Washed off makeup that had created a mask she was learning to wear. Climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "Saw you on the news. You looked beautiful. Are you happy?" The question stabbed through her. Happy. She was playing a role, trapped in a contract, engaged to a criminal who viewed her as an asset. How could she possibly be happy? But as she thought about the evening, about standing her ground, about Luca backing her play, about the way she'd felt when she'd looked Marco in the eye and refused to flinch, she realized something unsettling. She wasn't happy. But she wasn't entirely miserable either. She was adapting, finding pockets of power within powerlessness, learning to survive and maybe even thrive in hostile territory. "I'm okay, Dad," she texted back. "Better than okay. Don't worry about me." Another lie. But like all the others, it served a purpose. She set her phone aside and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring consequences from tonight's confrontation. Increased security, heightened tension, possibly real danger. The Castellinis weren't the type to forget slights. But for tonight, Alyssa had proven something important to the world, to Luca, and most critically to herself. She wasn't just playing the role of Mrs. De Lorenzo. She was becoming her. And that terrified her almost as much as it empowered her. The days following the gala were tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Luca's security detail increased as promised. Now she couldn't leave the estate without at least 2 bodyguards shadowing her movements. Her weekly visit with her father was moved to the estate grounds, conducted in the garden under watchful eyes. Her father had seen the news coverage, the photographs of her and Luca looking perfect together, the society page speculation about their whirlwind romance. He asked questions she couldn't answer honestly, made comments about how happy she looked, wondered when the wedding would be. 6 weeks, Alyssa told him, the timeline feeling both impossibly far and terrifyingly close. "Small ceremony, just family." "I'll be there," her father said, squeezing her hand. "Even if I have to fight my way past those security guards." She laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. The media attention was relentless. Paparazzi camped outside the estate gates. Society blogs dissected her background, her education, her fairy tale romance with the mysterious and powerful Luca De Lorenzo. Every photo from the gala was analyzed, every interaction scrutinized. The general consensus seemed to be that she was either incredibly lucky or incredibly naive, possibly both. Victoria continued her coaching sessions, now focused on how to handle media attention, how to deflect invasive questions, how to maintain privacy while living a public life. It was exhausting, learning to be perpetually on. But the real education came from watching Luca. He conducted business from his study, and sometimes Alyssa would find herself lingering nearby, listening to phone conversations conducted in that same calm, controlled tone he used for everything. He never yelled, never threatened overtly, just stated facts and let the implications speak for themselves. She started to understand how he'd built his empire. It wasn't just violence and intimidation, though those were certainly tools in his arsenal. It was intelligence, strategy, an almost supernatural ability to read people and situations, to anticipate moves before they were made. One evening, 3 weeks into her new life, Luca invited her to his study. "I want to show you something," he said. The study was impressive, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that probably cost more than a car, and walls decorated with art that was definitely original and definitely expensive. But Luca led her past all that to a door she'd never noticed before, concealed behind a bookshelf. It opened into a smaller room. Security monitors covered one wall, showing feeds from cameras positioned around the estate and apparently elsewhere. The other walls held maps, the city, broken into territories marked with different colors. "This is my operations center," Luca said. "I'm showing you this because you need to understand what you're part of, what you're protecting by playing this role." He pointed to the map. Red zones, blue zones, green zones, each color representing different levels of control, different operations, different levels of risk. "The Castellinis have been pushing into my territory for months," he explained. "These areas here," he indicated several blue zones, "are contested. They want them. I'm holding them. It's creating tension that could spill over into open conflict. Gang war." Alyssa said quietly. Business dispute, Luca corrected. But yes, essentially. The gala confrontation accelerated things. Marco's pride is wounded. Vincent sees an opportunity to paint me as distracted, weakened by sentiment. They're testing boundaries. Because of me. Because they're predators looking for any perceived weakness. You just happen to be the most visible evidence that I might care about something beyond business. Luca turned to face her. I'm telling you this because you need to understand the stakes. This isn't just theater anymore. Your safety is genuinely at risk. So what do? We proceed as planned. Wedding in 3 weeks. We make the marriage public, legal, binding in the eyes of both the legitimate world and the criminal one. Once you're officially my wife, harming you becomes an act of war against me directly. That raises the price of aggression considerably. Alyssa studied the map, the colored zones representing violence and money and power. And after the wedding, the Castellinis just accept it? No, but they'll have to be more strategic, more careful, which buys us time to consolidate, to strengthen positions, to prepare for whatever comes next. Luca pulled a folder from his desk, handing it to her. This is information on Marco and Vincent, their operations, their associates, their patterns. I want you to study it. Why? Because knowledge is power. Because if something happens, if you're ever in a situation where you need to understand who you're dealing with, you'll have the information. He paused. And because you've proven you can think strategically, I want you prepared. Alyssa opened the folder. Photographs, documents, maps, an entire intelligence profile on the Castellini family. You're training me, she said. I'm preparing you to survive. There's a difference. But as Alyssa took the folder and began studying its contents over the following days, she realized the line between those two things was thinner than Luca claimed. He was teaching her his world, not just the performance aspects, but the actual mechanics of power. And despite herself, despite her resistance to everything this arrangement represented, Alyssa found herself learning, absorbing, understanding the game being played all around her. The wedding approached like a storm on the horizon, inevitable, potentially destructive, impossible to avoid. Alyssa Carter was about to become Alyssa De Lorenzo, and she still wasn't entirely sure if that represented her salvation or her complete destruction. The wedding took place on a Tuesday morning in the study of Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman whose reputation for discretion was matched only by her willingness to overlook certain inconvenient questions when properly compensated. The room smelled of old books and furniture polish, the kind of sterile formality that stripped away any romance the occasion might have pretended to hold. Alyssa wore a simple cream dress that Victoria had selected, elegant but understated, appropriate for a civil ceremony. No veil, no train, no pretense that this was anything other than a legal transaction being disguised as a union. Luca stood beside her in a dark suit, looking as composed as ever. His hand found hers as Judge Morrison began the ceremony, his grip warm and steady. To anyone watching, they looked like any other couple taking this momentous step. Only Alyssa knew how hard her heart was pounding. Only she understood that every word of the vows felt like another lock clicking into place on her cage. Her father stood as witness, tears in his eyes that he kept trying to blink away. He believed this was real, believed his daughter had found love in the most unexpected place. The guilt of that deception sat heavy in Alyssa's chest. Richard Castellano served as Luca's witness, his expression professionally neutral but his eyes sharp, cataloging everything. Do you, Luca Michael De Lorenzo, take Alyssa Marie Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation, no emotion, just simple affirmation. And do you, Alyssa Marie Carter, take Luca Michael De Lorenzo to be your lawfully wedded husband? The words stuck in her throat for a moment. This was it, the point of no return. Once she said these words, she would be legally bound to this man for the next 2 years. Mrs. De Lorenzo in every official capacity. I do. The judge smiled. Then, by the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Luca turned to her, and for a brief moment something flickered in his eyes, an apology maybe, or an acknowledgement of what this moment actually meant. Then his hands cupped her face gently, and he kissed her. It was meant to be performative, brief, appropriate for their small audience. But Luca's lips were soft against hers, the kiss careful, and almost tender. For 3 heartbeats, Alyssa forgot to breathe, forgot to remember this was fake. Then he pulled away, and reality crashed back. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said warmly, completely oblivious to the transaction she'd just legitimized. Her father hugged her so tight she could barely breathe, whispering how proud he was, how happy he was for her. Each word was a knife. "Take care of my girl," he told Luca, shaking his hand. "I will," Luca promised. And strangely, Alyssa believed him. Not because he loved her, but because she was now officially his responsibility, his investment, his wife. The paperwork was signed. Mrs. Alyssa De Lorenzo became a legal reality. They had lunch at an upscale restaurant, the 4 of them, awkwardly navigating conversation that felt surreal. Her father asked about honeymoon plans. Luca smoothly deflected, citing business obligations and promising a proper trip later. More lies, stacking on top of lies. When they finally dropped her father off at his apartment, he hugged Alyssa one more time. "You're sure you're happy?" he asked quietly, searching her face. "I'm sure, Dad." "He's good to you? Really good to you?" "He is." That at least wasn't entirely a lie. Luca had been exactly what he'd promised. Fair, if cold. Controlling, but not cruel. "I promise." Her father nodded, satisfied. Okay, then I'm happy too." The car pulled away and Alyssa watched him disappear in the rearview mirror. A man who believed his daughter had found salvation when really she'd just signed a more permanent contract. "You're quiet," Luca observed. "I just lied to my father about the most important decision of my life. What am I supposed to be? Cheerful?" "No, but you knew that's what this would require." He was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, you played your part perfectly. He believes you're happy. That's what matters." "Is it?" "Because it feels like betrayal. It's protection. He can't worry about what he doesn't know." Luca's tone was pragmatic, infuriatingly logical. "You're protecting him from guilt. That's kindness, not betrayal." Alyssa wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too emotionally wrung out from maintaining the performance all day. When they arrived back at the estate, Mrs. Chen greeted them with genuine warmth. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. De Lorenzo. We've prepared a small celebration dinner if you'd like." "That would be lovely. Thank you," Luca said. The dinner was intimate, just the 2 of them in the formal dining room with champagne and an elaborate meal that Alyssa barely tasted. The staff had decorated with flowers, added candles. It looked romantic. It felt hollow. "This is strange," Alyssa said finally, breaking the silence. "What is?" "This. Us. Playing house." She gestured at the elegant table setting. "We're married now, but nothing has actually changed. We still have separate rooms. We still barely know each other. It's all just performance." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something. Some acknowledgement that today was significant, even if it wasn't real." Alyssa took a sip of champagne. "Instead, it's just another Tuesday." Luca set down his fork, considering her. "Would you prefer I pretend? Declare feelings I don't have? Make grand romantic gestures that mean nothing?" "No, but I also don't want to pretend this is normal. That getting married as part of a business transaction is just fine." "It's not fine. It's necessary. There's a difference." He paused. "But you're right that today was significant. You're my wife now. That changes things, whether we acknowledge it or not." "How?" "You're under my protection officially. My enemies can't touch you without declaring war. Your father's safe, permanently. Your future is secured, assuming you complete the contract." Luca leaned back. "Those aren't small things, Alyssa." "No, but they're not marriage things. They're business things. In my world, they're the same thing." And there it was, the fundamental disconnect between them. Luca saw everything through the lens of strategy and power. Alyssa still clung to the idea that some things should mean more than their transactional value. She excused herself early, claiming exhaustion. In her room, still her room, not theirs, never theirs, she changed out of the cream dress and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the gold band on her finger. Mrs. De Lorenzo. The name still felt foreign, wrong, like a costume she couldn't take off. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma, her best friend from school. OMG, just saw the announcement. You got married? Why didn't you tell me? Call me. Alyssa stared at the message. Another relationship that would now require lies and careful management. Another person she'd have to deceive to maintain the illusion. She typed back. It was very last minute. I'll call you soon. Promise. Delete. Retype. Delete again. Finally, she just turned off her phone. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Public appearances as Mr. and Mrs. De Lorenzo increased. Charity events, business dinners, social gatherings where Alyssa learned to navigate conversations with people who had more money than morals. She got better at reading the room, at identifying allies and enemies, at presenting the perfect image of a woman happily married to a powerful man. Privately, things remained careful and distant. Luca worked long hours, managing his empire from his study. Alyssa finished her semester remotely, her professors accommodating once they understood she'd married into significant wealth. Money, she was learning, opened doors that had been firmly closed before. She also continued studying the information Luca had given her about the Castellinis and other rival operations. The more she learned about his world, the more she understood the delicate balance of power that kept everything from exploding into open warfare. And the Castellinis were pushing, testing boundaries, small provocations that Luca handled with calculated responses. It was like watching a chess match played with human lives. One evening, 6 weeks into their marriage, Luca invited her to his study for what he called a business discussion. I need your help with something, he said, which was unusual enough to make Alyssa immediately wary. What kind of help? There's a situation developing, a gathering of the major families next week, a negotiation over territory disputes. The Castellinis will be there, along with representatives from 3 other operations. Luca pulled up a seating chart on his computer. Traditionally, wives attend these meetings. They're supposed to be neutral observers, but everyone knows they're gathering intelligence, making their own assessments. You want me to spy? I want you to observe. Listen. Pay attention to dynamics between the families, particularly between Vincent Castellini and the others. I need to know if he's forming alliances against me. Why would I be better at that than your actual security team? Because you're not known to them. You're new, presumably naive. They'll talk more freely around you, underestimate you. It's an advantage. Luca met her eyes. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Alyssa thought about it. This was beyond their original agreement, beyond playing the trophy wife at charity galas. This was actual involvement in his criminal operations, but she was also curious. And if she was being honest, she wanted to prove she could be useful for more than just appearances. What exactly do I need to look for? Luca spent the next hour briefing her on the key players, their relationships, their typical negotiation tactics. He taught her what body language to watch for, what verbal cues might indicate hidden alliances, how to memorize conversations without appearing to pay attention. It was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. One more thing, Luca said as the session ended. These gatherings can be dangerous. Not directly, there are rules about violence during negotiations, but tensions run high. Stay close to me, don't wander off, don't engage anyone alone. I thought you said I'd be underestimated. You will be, but that doesn't make you safe, just less obviously targeted. His expression was serious. Promise me, Alyssa. No heroics like at the gala. Just observe and stay safe. I promise. The gathering took place in a private room at an exclusive club downtown. When Alyssa and Luca arrived, she was struck by how civilized everything looked. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, servers circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was just another high society event. But Alyssa did know better now. She recognized the faces from Luca's briefings, Vincent Castellini and his wife, a cold woman named Isabella, the Moretti family, who controlled the port operations, the Chen syndicate, who ran most of the gambling, the Volkov brothers, whose territory bordered Luca's on the east side. Each group clustered together, the wives forming their own subset conversations while the men discussed business. Luca's hand was steady on her back as he guided her into the room. Remember, he murmured, just watch and listen. Isabella Castellini approached almost immediately. Alyssa, how lovely to see you again. They'd met once before at another event. Isabella had been polite but assessing, clearly trying to determine if Alyssa was a genuine threat or just window dressing. Isabella, you look beautiful. The compliment was automatic, meaningless. Marriage agrees with you. You're positively glowing. Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes. Luca is taking good care of you, I trust. Very good care. How wonderful. Young love is such a precious thing. The condescension in her tone was barely masked. Though I'm sure you're discovering that being married to a man like Luca comes with certain complications. Every marriage has complications. True. Though not every marriage involves the kind of business our husbands conduct. Isabella took a sip of her champagne. Tell me, dear, how are you handling all of it? The pressure, the expectations, the knowledge of what your husband really does? It was a probe, testing for weakness. Alyssa remembered Luca's coaching. I handle it by supporting my husband and focusing on building our future together, she said evenly. Everything else is just noise. Isabella's eyes narrowed fractionally. How admirably naive. Or admirably focused. Perspective is everything. Alyssa smiled sweetly. Before Isabella could respond, the men began moving toward the conference table. The wives were directed to a separate seating area, close enough to observe but far enough to maintain the fiction of exclusion. Alyssa settled into her seat, feigning disinterest while her attention laser-focused on the table. The negotiation began formally, with each family presenting their current territorial claims. Luca spoke with his usual calm authority, outlining his positions clearly and backing them with logical arguments. Vincent Castellini countered with aggressive pushback, trying to claim disputed zones. But what Alyssa noticed was the way the other families watched. Moretti seemed neutral, nodding along with both sides. Chen appeared uncomfortable, shifting in his seat whenever tensions rose. The Volkov brothers exchanged glances whenever Castellini made a point, subtle agreement that suggested alliance. She filed it away, memorizing details. The wives around her engaged in their own conversations, surface-level gossip that masked their own intelligence gathering. Alyssa participated minimally, more interested in watching the dynamics at the main table. Then Marco Castellini appeared. He wasn't part of the official negotiation, but lingered near the bar, watching. When his eyes found Alyssa's, his smile was all predator. She looked away, refusing to engage, but she could feel his attention on her, unsettling and deliberate. An hour into the negotiations, a break was called. The men dispersed to network and posture. Luca came directly to Alyssa. Anything? He asked quietly. The Volkovs are with Castellini. Chen is nervous. He doesn't want to pick sides. Moretti is waiting to see which way the wind blows. Alyssa kept her voice low. And Marco is watching me. It's intentional. Luca's jaw tightened. Stay in this area. Don't go anywhere alone. But 10 minutes later, when Alyssa excused herself to use the restroom, Marco was waiting in the hallway. Mrs. De Lorenzo, fancy meeting you here. Alyssa's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. Marco, excuse me, I need to... Just a quick word. He stepped into her path, not touching, but definitely blocking. I wanted to congratulate you on your marriage. Very sudden, wasn't it? When you know, you know. Indeed. Though one has to wonder what a smart girl like you really knows about the man she married. Marco's smile was sharp. Tell me, has Luca told you about the Riverside incident? The warehouse fire that killed 8 people? Or the district attorney who mysteriously dropped charges last year after his daughter's car was found at the bottom of the river? Ice crawled down Alyssa's spine. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Luca keeps his secrets well, but you should know what kind of monster you're sleeping beside. Marco leaned closer. Or maybe you do know, and you just don't care. Maybe you're not the innocent engineering student everyone thinks you are. Get out of my way! Or what? You'll tell your husband? Run for help? You're all alone out here, Alyssa. No bodyguards, no witnesses. Just you and me having a friendly conversation. Fear spiked through her, but Alyssa forced it down. Marco was testing her, trying to provoke a reaction. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. If you're trying to intimidate me, it's not working. If you're trying to drive a wedge between me and Luca, that won't work either. And if you're stupid enough to actually threaten me here in front of all these people, then you're even dumber than I thought. She met his eyes steadily. Now move. For a long moment, Marco just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. You've got steel in you. I can see why Luca chose you. He stepped aside. But steel breaks eventually, Mrs. De Lorenzo. Remember that. Alyssa walked past him on shaking legs, her heart hammering. She made it to the restroom and locked herself in a stall, breathing hard. Marco's words echoed in her mind. The Riverside incident, the district attorney's daughter, specific enough to be credible, designed to plant doubt. Was it true? Had Luca ordered those things? Of course he had, or things like them. She'd known from the beginning what he was. A criminal, a killer by proxy if not by direct action. But hearing specific incidents, specific victims, made it more real, more visceral. She was married to a man who destroyed lives, and she was helping him maintain his power. When she emerged, Luca was in the hallway, his expression dark. Marco cornered you. How did you? Security cameras. I saw him follow you. Luca's hand found her elbow. What did he say? He tried to scare me. Told me about things you've done. Riverside incident. Something about a district attorney's daughter. Alyssa searched his face. Are they true? Luca was quiet for a long moment. Yes. The simple honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Did you kill those people? I gave orders that led to their deaths. Whether I pulled the trigger myself is semantics. His eyes were steady on hers. I told you from the beginning what I am, Alyssa. I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things to build and maintain my power. Marco wasn't lying. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. Because you deserve honesty about who you're bound to. Luca's grip on her elbow gentled. If you want to back out now, we can negotiate something. It won't be clean, but no. The word surprised her, but she meant it. I'm not backing out. I'm just processing. Why? Most people would run. Because running doesn't change anything. The deal is made. My father's safe. And honestly, Alyssa met his eyes. I'm not sure I could go back to being who I was before even if I wanted to. That girl is gone. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Respect, maybe, or understanding. We should get back. The negotiations are resuming. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Alyssa observed as requested, cataloging alliances and tensions. When it finally ended, she had a mental list of intelligence that would be valuable to Luca. In the car ride home, she briefed him on everything she'd noticed. He listened intently, asking clarifying questions, clearly impressed by her observations. You're good at this, he said when she finished. At spying on criminals? At reading people? At seeing beneath surfaces to what's actually happening? Luca turned to look at her. I meant what I said earlier. If you want out, we'll find a way. I don't want out. I want... Alyssa paused, trying to articulate something she was only beginning to understand. I want to stop being passive. Stop being just an asset you're protecting. If I'm going to be part of this world for 2 years, I want to be actually useful, not just decoration. You're already useful. Tonight proved that. Then use me. Teach me. Make me an actual partner in this arrangement instead of just a prop. The words tumbled out, surprising even her. I'm tired of feeling powerless. Luca studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're asking for? This isn't just plain dress-up anymore. This is actual involvement in things that could get you hurt, killed. I understand. Why? Why risk it? Because sitting in that beautiful cage you've built, waiting for 2 years to pass, is slowly destroying me. At least if I'm active, if I'm learning and contributing, I'll have some control over my own life. Alyssa turned to face him fully. You said I had more power than I realized. Prove it. Give me real responsibility. She watched something shift in his expression, calculation giving way to decision. All right, he said finally, if that's what you want. But understand this. Once you cross this line, there's no going back to ignorance. You'll know things that make you complicit. You'll be part of my world in ways that can't be undone. I'm already complicit. I've been complicit since I signed that first contract. Alyssa held his gaze. At least this way I'll have agency. Luca nodded slowly. Then tomorrow, we begin your real education. And despite everything, despite the fear, despite the moral implications, despite knowing she was walking further into darkness, Alyssa felt something unexpected. Relief. She was done being a pawn. It was time to learn how to be a player. The education Luca promised began the next morning in his operations center. Maps covered the table, Financial documents spread across every surface, and security footage played silently on multiple monitors. This was the nerve center of his empire, and he was inviting her inside. "Everything I'm about to show you makes you an accessory," Luca said, his tone serious. "You understand that?" "I understand." Over the following weeks, Alyssa learned the architecture of organized crime, not the Hollywood version with dramatic shootouts and theatrical violence, but the actual mechanics: money laundering through legitimate businesses, territorial agreements enforced through calculated pressure, information networks that tracked every significant movement in the city. It was complex, methodical, and disturbingly logical. She learned that Luca's construction company wasn't just a front, but an actual profitable business that also provided cover for moving contraband. That his real estate holdings served dual purposes: legitimate income and strategic territorial control. That violence was always the last resort because it was expensive, messy, and drew unwanted attention. "Power isn't about fear," Luca explained one afternoon as they reviewed reports. "Fear is a tool, but it's crude. Real power is about making yourself indispensable. About controlling resources people need and can't get elsewhere. About being the solution to problems you sometimes create." That's sociopathic. That's survival in a world without rules. He looked at her. "You're learning this because you asked. But you don't have to like it." "I don't, but I'm starting to understand it." The Castellini